Hello everyone, Underdog Chris here, back to bring you all another video. This time, I will be delving into the main character of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's Yuga Odo, and why I think he is doomed to be in an infinite tragedy forever, unless certain things happen. You're probably thinking, well, this sounds pretty grim, and pretty far-fetched, especially for a Rush Yu-Gi-Oh! Show. However, I would like to explain my reasoning to see why I think this is the case. This will be your first and only spoiler warning though. If you haven't watched or finished Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's or Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush and you do plan to do so, please click off this video right now. And so with that being said, I'll get started. So, Yuga Odo in the final episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's has this grand battle against a character named Otes. The two duke it out and both go off into hyperspace. So, Otis, who's the final boss of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's, is a person who Yuga considers his arch nemesis, a person who Yuga has stated multiple times that he's his sworn enemy. Yet, despite this, in the later episodes of Go Rush, we see Yuga start to slowly act like Otis and do some pretty ethically questionable things, which I'll touch more upon later. Heck, Yuga even says himself that he'll become Otis if he has to, which could mean multiple things. Number 1. The Otis that is being referenced and seen throughout most of 7's and Go Rush is likely an older version of Yuga, which kind of goes into conspiracy territory, but hear me out. Or, number 2, Yuga means it as a symbolic metaphor and he doesn't mean that he will seriously become the physical embodiment of Otis. Granted, Yuamu, one of his ancestors during the Season 2 finale duel of Go Rush, does also state that she will bear the burden of becoming Otis, which could have some implications as to where this theory could go. In fact, Yuamu could be a key factor into how this all played out. Now, I want to quickly go over something I just said before. Notice how I said that the Otis that we see throughout most of 7's and Go Rush is actually an older version of Yuga Odo. This is because of a theory another Yugi-tuber made, who I've referenced before in the past, Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything. Dylan would often say in his weekly Go Rush podcasts that the Otis that we see in episode 1 or throughout the first few arcs of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's is one person, but that somewhere along the line, this Otis was mysteriously replaced with someone else. How exactly? We don't know. But I do think it helps out my theory with both of the scenarios I presented. Allow me to explain. If we go with my first theory, that the Otis being referenced is likely an older version of Yuga, there are a few things that can lean towards this direction. Firstly, in the Go Rush arc that Yuga first returns in, the arc with the Lug, we see what happens to Yuga after his confrontation with Otis. Otis mysteriously vanishes and Yuga gets taken by Zuijo and his crew, who demand that he installs rush duels. Yuga gets captured for a little and complies, before dipping. He crash lands by Goha Yuna and Asaka Mutsuba, and then with their help, he creates rush duels in the past. He then sought out Udius Velgear in his Yuga Man outfit, and also got the ball rolling with him and having him engage with rush duels. Then he helps Udius defeat the Lug, and he appears a few more times, getting carded by Phaser. He goes into the future with his ancestors as a cat, and sees a glimpse of what happens when he's supposed to come back. Yuhi and Yuamu, more so Yuamu, now see this struggle from Yuga's perspective and vow to wish that he comes back home. Then a few more arcs happen, and then we get to the arc where the Valkyrians are dying off. And yes, they actually died. And as of now, except Zuijo, all the other Valkyrians have yet to be revived. So, as that's happening, we see Yuga has this jaded, standoffish attitude about a lot of things. Usually, everyone would try and get to Yuga for all the answers, as he seems to know everything. But Yuga in this arc seems very hesitant and looks to be actively avoiding the group. Goha Yuna did chalk it up to determination and seeming dead set on what he wanted to do, which sure, part of it could be that, but he also seemed very angry, which is not something that we typically see in Yuga. Yuga is starting to get angry and desperate, and we don't know the full reason as to why for a little. Then, towards the end of Season 2, we get this ominous scene at the end of one of the episodes where Yuga says, "It's about time to go." Yuga seemed ready to head out and do his own thing. Despite the Valkyrians being on the verge of death and extinction, Yuga seemed dead set on trying to shut down the rush duel control system. Now, I'm gonna be honest, even as someone who's watched the episode at least twice, the details do get a bit hazy, so please correct me in the comments section if I'm wrong about this, but I believe that Yuga wanted to shut down the Rush Duel control system for two reasons. One of the reasons I believe that Yuga did such a drastic move was because of the fact that he wanted the timelines to line back up in the first place. Essentially, him fixing the screw up of him bringing Rush Duels into the past, which should not have happened at all. As he stated in the arc with the Lug, Rush Duels should have never been brought to this era. Rush Duels were not a thing in this era originally. Or, the second reason could be that he wanted to stop any potential catastrophe from happening with the usage of Monster Reborn, which Yuhi and Kawaii Duel were looking into to revive the Valkyrians. While Yuhi and Ko were trying to use it, Yuga was immediately getting flashbacks of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s when Gohai Yuga used Monster Reborn to wipe the memories of his friends. He did not want something like that to happen again in Go Rush, and so this was why he was trying so hard to prevent Yuhi from using it in their duel. Though, what actually ends up happening instead is that Yuga somehow gets knocked out cold by the Rush robot. Yuumu, seeming like the only one who was sympathizing with Yuga, ended up taking his side and taking over the duel on his behalf, with Udius taking over for Yuhi. An emotional back and forth ensues, but Yuumu ultimately loses the duel. Afterwards though, we see that Yuga is still out cold, and so Yuumu and the other main cast members of Go Rush, particularly the past variants, help her send Yuga off to what looks like the future. I mean, we see the Goha space station, Yuumu gives her descendants an emotional send-off, and they ship Yuga to the future before Yuumu then gets taken. Sounds like a lot has happened. However, I do want to circle back to the stuff that happened to Yuga. When we saw Yuga come back at the end of 7s, we saw that he had some interesting tech, and he wasn't unconscious when he landed in his own present time period. Not only that, but the outfit and even positioning of everything is a lot more different than what the end of Season 2 of Go Rush gave us. Also, to me, it just seemed like something was a little off with the Goha space station. It didn't look as advanced as something you would see in the 7th time period, and it does seem to be a step up from the tech we would see in Go Rush. However, this is where I think multiple branches appear for the Rush Yu-Gi-Oh! Timeline. Allow me to explain the following. One branch is the fact that maybe Yuga never makes it back and he actually ends up 20 to 30 years before the start of 7s. With Yuga having no way of making it back, he could possibly become a version of Otes, and the Rush timeline plays out in this infinite loop of Yuga and Otes constantly going back to the past and trying to get back to the future but failing. This kind of leads into a small theory I have on Yuumu being the main villain of Season 3, or at least in cahoots with them. With Yuga being sent to the wrong timeline, Yuumu could become distraught and racked with guilt before she then decides to fully align herself with the Dark Matter Darkmen in an act of desperation, or some other villainous entities later on in the season. But there is a lighter note. There's the second branch. While Yuga still gets sent to the wrong timeline initially, Yuumu or Gohai Yuna or some other outside force helps pluck Yuga out of this point in this timeline and succeeds in helping him get back to his actual time period. After all, there was that one trippy but really good episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush where Yuga, as a cat, did go to the future and did see what looked to be himself coming back to the future. Basically, the ending of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s from a different perspective. So for what it's worth, I think it also opened up the possibilities as to the fate of Yuga Odo at the end of these two Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows. And with all that being said, that's about it for this video. I enjoyed trying to theorize about what exactly happens to Yuga Odo. Does he make it back? Is he forever destined to repeat an infinite loop? Who knows? One thing I do know for sure is that it's a very exciting plot point that I want to see resolved within the next year or so. But please, Bridge, don't extend this to Yu-Gi-Oh! 9 and give us a good conclusion to Yuga's journey. I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing day.